أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يا أرحم الراحمين. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for beneficial knowledge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us to be of the people of the Quran. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us to be of those who recite the Quran in a manner that's pleasing to Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to do what He pleases. Previously, we covered, or we started talking about the rules pertaining to a noon as-sakina, the non-voweled noon, and the tanween. So we started talking about the rules pertaining to the non-voweled noon and tanween, and we said that essentially the non-voweled noon and tanween are the same in terms of sound. The difference between the non-voweled noon and tanween is that the non-voweled noon is an actual noon that you see either in the middle of a word or at the end of a word, and the tanween is indicated by a doubled fatha or kasra or dhamma at the end of nouns. Tanween is indicated by a doubled fatha, kasra or dhamma at the end of nouns. So anytime you see a noon sakina, a non-voweled noon or tanween, the rule, there are one of four rules. The first of which we discussed last class is idgham. Idgham is clarity, and basically idgham has two things that need to happen with idgham. The first is the noon, sakina or tanween, a non-voweled noon or tanween, need to be pronounced from its original articulation point, which is the tip of the tongue touching the gums that are just behind the two front teeth. That's the first thing. It needs to be pronounced from its original articulation point. And the second is there needs to be no extra nasalization. No extra nasalization. And we could look at some of these examples just to recap. Kufuwan ahad. We don't say kufuwan ahad. Kufuwan ahad. So that's tanween followed by hamza. شيء خلق من أي شيء خلق من أي, that's noon sakina followed by hamza. شيء خلق tanween followed by a kha. سلام هي tanween followed by a ha. من حسنة noon sakina followed by a ha. من علق noon sakina followed by a ain. ملائكة غلاظ tanween followed by a ghain. Examples within one word. والمنخنقة noon sakina followed by a kha. وينهون noon sakina followed by a ha. وانحر noon sakina followed by a ha. وينأون noon sakina followed by hamza. And of course the letters of idgham are six, the six throat letters. And they say the reason why there's idgham, there's clarity, is because there's no reason to apply ikhfa no reason to hide the hamza or the nun sakina, because excuse me, there's no reason to conceal the nun sakina or tanween, because the throat letters are so far away from the nun sakina. The reason why there is concealment or insertion is because of the close proximity between the nun sakina or the tanween, close proximity between the nun sakina and the letters of idgham. That's why there's insertion, or close proximity between the letters of the nun sakina and the letters of ikhfa, concealment. But the letters of ilhar that's so far back, there's no need for concealment nor insertion. Allah knows best. The second rule of nun sakina and tanween is insertion, al-idgham. What is al-idgham? Its a linguistic definition is insertion or merging. تعريفه في الاصطلاح إيصال حرف ساكن بحرف متحرك بحيث يصير الحرفان حرفا واحدا مشددا كالثاني ويرتفع المخرج عنهما ارتفاعة واحدة. Its applied definition is joining of a voweled letter, joining of a non-voweled letter with a voweled letter, so that the two letters become one emphasized letter of the second type. The articulation point is lifted from its position after the idgham or after the insertion as one movement. What this is saying is that because of the first letter, because the first letter has merged into the second, only the articulation point of the second letter is used. And when we get to the examples, I'll explain the definition a little further, inshallah. حروفه مجموعة في كلمة يرملون أو يرملون. Its letters are the letters that form the word يرملون, meaning if one of these 6 letters are at the beginning of the word which immediately follows a word that ended in a nun sakina or a tanween, then the nun merges the nun merges or immerses into the next letter. The idgham rule for the nun sakina and tanween can only take place between 2 words, not within 1 word. Okay, so there's a few points that are in this paragraph. The first point is that nun sakina or the rule of idgham only applies if it's between 2 words. So if the last letter of one word is nun sakina or tanween, and then the following word begins with one of the letters of idgham, yarmulun, then the rule is idgham. So if it's in one word, so if you have a nun sakin in the middle of a word, and after it is one of the idgham letters, and after that nun sakina is one of the idgham letters, then the rule there's no idgham. That's the first point. Now, the second point no. Okay, so that's just one point. Yeah. The idgham itself is divided into 2 categories or 2 groups, and each will be described below. The first is idgham bi ghunnah, the second is idgham bi ghayri ghunnah. Idgham bi ghunnah, insertion with nasalization. Ghunnah basically means the nasal sound. When a reader is reciting the Quran and there is a noon sakina or tanween at the end of a word, and the first letter of the next word is one of four letters in the group yanmu or nemo, the idgham bi Ghunnah rule is then applied. These four letters, yanmu or nemo, make up this subgroup of the larger group of idgham, merging, yarmulun. When the noon sakina letter, the letter noon with no vowel, meets one of the letters in the group yanmu, the noon is not pronounced clearly. Instead, it is inserted or merged into the next letter with an accompanying ghunnah, nasalization, which is left over from the noon. So what happens is the noon sakina is no longer pronounced. The noon sakina is no longer pronounced. What is pronounced is the following letter with an added nasalization. So examples that are given, qulubu, the dhamma stays, but the tanween goes away. قلوب يومئذ واجفة قلوب يومئذ واجفة والله من ورائهم ألم نخلقكم من ماء مهين. So if you notice, قلوب يوم, the tanween, you don't hear the noon. قلوب يوم, that noon is not there anymore. What's there is just a ya. قلوب. But that ya has the sound of has the nasal sound, or the sound of it is coming through the nose. قلوب يومئذ. The same thing, إذ يومئذ. So the waw, the sound of the waw is actually coming through the nose. يومئذ. Now, with in the case of the meme, noon sakina followed by a meme, then it's just a meme. But that meme is elongated, or the nasalization of the meme is longer. Mimma. Now, if a noon sakina is followed by one of the idgham letters within one word, there is no idgham. There's no idgham. Instead, we say the noon clearly. In this case, it is called idharun mutlaq, or absolute idhar. Absolute clarity. It is called this because it is not from al-idhar al-halqi, meaning the throat idhar. The idhar al-halqi category previously described, nor of any of the other idhar categories that will be discussed later. The occurrence of a noon sakina followed by one of the letters of the group yanmu in the same word occurs in 4 words in the Quran, always with the noon sakina being followed by either a waw or a ya. So these 4 words are the only words that you'll find noon sakina followed by one of the idgham letters in one word. These are the only words, and they'll always be, the noon sakina will always be followed by a waw or a ya. The 4 words are qinwan, sinwan, bunyan, ad-dunya. And the reason for idhar in this case is that if the idgham rule was applied, the true meaning of the word would be confusing to understand. So, for example, if it qinwan, it's not clear what word you're saying. An exception to the above rule, so this is in one word, to be absolutely clear. This is in one word. Okay? And she mentions that there's an exception to the rule where I feel that it's not really an exception because it's a different case. And the exception that is mentioned, the idgham rule can only be applied between two words, is the beginning separated letters written as one word at the beginning of the two surahs. The reason why I don't think that it's the same is because these Surah Al-Shu'ara and Qasas, Qasim, Mim, is not considered to be a word. It's written as a word, but it's not considered to be a word because it's letters. The separated letters at the beginning of some surahs are read as if the letters are written out. So in this case, they are read as Qasim, Mim. The letter seen in this group of letters ends with a nun sakina. These group of letters are written as one word, but even with this, we apply the nun sakina rule on the nun sakina, which is the last letter of the written letter seen, with the following separate letter, mim. And we merge the nun sakina into the mim. And then there's one last exception that is mentioned for with the idgham bi Ghunnah, where the nun sakina is followed by a waw, in which the nun sakina is the last letter of the separated spelled out letters at the beginning of some surahs, and following the letter after that is a waw. This occurs twice in the Quran, once at the beginning of Surah Yasin, and the other at the beginning of Surah Al-Qalam. Yasin wal-Qur'ani, Noon wal-Qalam. Yasin wal-Quran, Noon wal-Qalam. Here, the lack of idgham occurs when we read the letter Noon and Sin in continuum with the next letter, which is a waw. It is to be noted that the separate letter Noon at the beginning of these two surahs end with a nun sakina, as does the letter Sin. And that is what is being referred to here. Hafs, the great Imam of the Quran, whom we take our specific reading from, by the way of Shatibiyya, reads these above two examples with Idhar when joining the nun sakina, the nun and Sin, from the separate letters at the beginning of the surah with the next word. These letters can also be read by stopping on the nun sakina, taking a breath, then reading the waw in the normal way. Okay, so let me unpack this right quick so we can understand what's going on and be on the same page. So what's going on here is nun sakina or tanween, when it's followed by one of yarmulun letters, the rule is idgham. That's the first thing. Idgham is two types. Idgham with nasalization, without nasalization. Idgham with nasalization, if the nun sakin or tanween is followed by one of the letters yanmu or nemo. Nun, ya, mim, waw. There's idgham, insertion with nasalization. Min wali, min waq, man yasha, mimma, man nasha. And that's only if it's between two words. If the nun sakina is followed by one of the letters of idgham in the same word, then there's no nasalization, or there's no idgham, there's no insertion. Okay? That's the rule of idgham. Now, on a side note, Tasim, Mim, there's idgham, and that's because they're the cut-off letters. So takes a different ruling. Okay? And at the beginning of two surahs, Yasin wal Quran and Noon wal Qalam, there's no idgham. Even though noon ends with a noon sakina and yasin ends with a noon sakina and they're both followed by a waw. There's no idgham. And that's to summarize. Does anyone have any questions?
Nope.
So, inshallah, tomorrow I'll ask you guys about noon sakina, the idgham, and all of that, inshallah.
Inshallah.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك